Thank you. Welcome, everybody, to Electoral Service Area Committee on Wednesday, February 12th. 5th, thank you. The next board meeting is on the 12th. First, I'd like to recognize that the CVRD is on the unceded territories of the Kwatsan, Malahat, Savassit, Halat, Penelakut, Stamanis, Liaxin, Pakwichin, Dididat, Pachidat nations, whose people have walked gently here for thousands of years. I'm just going to pause while we... I'm lucky enough to hear my own voice 5 seconds after I said something. There we go. Thank you. That's a perfect segue. I did want to just let everybody know at home and that's in the gallery that we're testing out some brand new equipment today, which should make our meetings run a little smoother, but obviously there may be some hiccups along the way. Also, just on a personal note, I'd like to just this is my first time chairing, and I'm very honored to be doing it. And I've lived in Cowichan for most of my life, and it's pretty cool that I get this opportunity. With that, we'll move to the approval of the agenda. If I could get a mover.
Sorry, Chair. I do have one new business item.
Thank you.
So it was circulated to the directors on Friday, and the motion is that the letter dated January 24th, 2025, from Calvin Slade, Chair, Board of Trustees, Cowichan Bay Waterworks District, regarding the moratorium on granting permission for new water connections and developments in the Cowichan Bay Waterworks District, that the agenda be approved as amended.
Moved. Seconded. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, Ms. Boyd. Moving on to adoption of the minutes. It is recommended that the minutes of the Special Electoral Area Service Committee meeting of January 15th, 2025 be adopted. Moved. Seconded. All in favor? Carried. Moving on to business arising, or there's no business arising from the minutes. Moving on to public input period. Do we have people in the gallery? Yeah. The public input period is to offer the public an opportunity to comment on an agenda item before the committee considers the item. The public input period procedure policy allows for an allotment of 15 minutes, where the speaker is welcome to comment on any items on the agenda up to a maximum of 3 minutes. This excludes items that are or have been subject to a public hearing. Input from the community is valued and appreciated. We request that the input is presented in a friendly, respectful way. Your cooperation in maintaining a safe, respectful, and orderly environment is greatly appreciated. Welcome. Yes.
Okay, beautiful. All right, thank you. I'm here today to address agenda item R2, which is with respect to the comprehensive zoning and bylaw update project and the updated project charter that's being presented. My name is Rebecca Papadopoulos, and my husband and I own Keating Farm. It's one of the oldest farms in Cowichan Valley and an important agricultural heritage site. We raise a variety of meat products, eggs, honey, juice, and hay using regenerative, sustainable, and ethical farming methods. We sell all of our farm products direct to consumer in our community, and we also host weddings and agritourism activities and events. I'm here today to speak on behalf of Cowichan Agricultural Society and as a local farmer that's being negatively impacted by our existing area zoning and bylaws. As noted in the staff report, the comprehensive zoning bylaw project was first initiated in early 2023 and is now forecast to be completed in the mid-2026, which is 6 months later than was projected last year. This zoning bylaw update project is now going to take approximately 4 years to complete, and that seems like an incredibly long time to complete that work. Our existing bylaws are very much out of date and out of alignment with the Agricultural Lands Commission regulations, and they were also not updated to align with the approved HOCP work that was done in 2021. As an example of that, agritourism has been a permitted farm use in the Agricultural Lands Commission use regs since 2016. A permitted farm use may not be prohibited by local government bylaw. Additionally, agritourism was clearly identified in the strategic objectives of the HOCP in 2021, yet still today, nearly all of the electoral area bylaws do not allow agritourism as a permitted use. I'm left with the question, how did that happen? Agritourism is just one example, and there are many more that we would be happy to provide more details on. In the meantime, as CVRD has been working away on their plans and strategies and feasibility studies, farmers in the electoral areas are being seriously and negatively impacted by the existing electoral area bylaws. As you're aware, Cowichan Ag Society submitted a letter to CVRD expressing these concerns late last year. In our letter, we suggested that CVRD could better support local ag by continuing the conversation with the agricultural community regarding the new ag zoning bylaws, especially since, based on the feedback provided by the community last November, these policies being presented by CVRD are far from what the community wants and needs. There's still a lot of work to be done there. We also requested that CVRD reinstate an AAC, an Agricultural Advisory Committee, to support CVRD's numerous community planning processes, including the Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw update. And lastly, we requested that CVRD process a zoning amendment to update the existing bylaws to align with the current Agricultural Lands Commission use regulations and the approved OCP to provide farmers some immediate relief until the MOCP and Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw are completed and approved. All seemingly reasonable requests, but we did receive a letter from CVRD late last year denying all of these requests. Now the staff are recommending another 6-month extension to the already incredibly long Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw update process. We're left with the questions, where do we go from here? How much longer can farmers endure this situation? And why isn't CVRD willing to take action and commit resources to supporting farmers and farming within our community? We hope that you can reflect on these questions too and ask yourself what CVRD can do differently to better support farmers as we move forward with this comprehensive zoning bylaw process. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Is there anybody else in the gallery that would like to share? Okay, with that, help me, Ms. Boyd. We are on to correspondence.
C1. Thank you, Chair. C1, that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid electoral area C, Cobble Hill, in the amount of $1,000 be provided to the RCMSAR 34 Marine Rescue Society to support financing repairs to rescue equipment, a planned boat lift, and replacement or rebuild of their vessel in 2027.
Moved. Second. All in favor? Carried.
C2, that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid electoral area E, Cowichan Station, Satlam, Glenora, in the amount of $2,000 be provided to the Take a Hike Foundation to provide critical, preventative, and early intervention mental health supports and outdoor-based learning opportunities for Cowichan youth.
That is moved. Seconded. All in favor? And carried.
C3, that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid electoral area I, Ubo-Mead Creek, in the amount of $1,000 be provided to the Lake Cowichan School for 2 $500 bursaries for 2 graduating students that reside in electoral area I, Ubo-Mead Creek, to support their future education or training.
And that's moved. Seconded. All in favor? And carried. Thank you. Excellent. On to reports. R1. And can you help me with this part? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. We have a report from the Development Services Division regarding application RZ 24A02 746 750 754 760 and 766 Handy Road and 2673 and 2691 Mill Bay Road PID 001-293-605-000-697-770, 001-293-648-001-293-613, 001, you know what I'm going with, right? 001-293-630-001-293-621, and 001-349-325.
Thank you, Ms. Boyd. My mama didn't raise a fool. I was definitely handing that one off. I believe we have Yuli Seo. Please come to the podium. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this development is a combined OCP and zoning bylaw amendment application. The proposed development is a residential development which include 2 apartment buildings ranging from 122 to 139 units, about 5 or 6 stories. 4 blocks of townhouses, 22 units, 3 stories, and there will be a partial consolidation for all those numbers that you just mentioned. There are a lot of PIDs. Next slide. Okay, thank you. So the site is located in the Mill Bay Village, with the Mill Bay Shopping Center to the west, the Mill Bay Marina to the right, which is the east. As you can see on this map, there are a number of parcels that is proposed to be consolidated. Next slide, please. And here's the conceptual site plan for the development. So on the west side, which is on the left, will be 2 blocks of apartment buildings of 5 to 6 stories with underground parquet. And in the middle is a courtyard surrounded by 2 rows of townhouses. And on the east side will be 2 more blocks of townhouses, and throughout the site there will be on surface parking, and there will be also a walking path along the south side of Handy Road, connecting the Mill Bay Road to the marina. Next slide, please. And here's a view looking from the north towards the south, looking at the development. Next slide. The site is currently designated residential in the OCP. Relevant policies from the OCP provides a wide range of housing, encourage development of multifamily housing that is compatible with the surrounding environment. The policy supports provision of water and sewer services and encourage roadside paths and infrastructure for pedestrians and cyclists. And the site is within development permit area, DPA 1, riparian protection, DPA 4, aquifer protection, and DPA 5, wildfire hazard. And the current zoning for the site is R3 and R3A, which permits primarily single detached housing. The site is within 3 service areas: the Mill Bay Water Works District, the Mill Springs Sewer System, and the Mill Bay Fire Service area. Next slide, please. So the development is suitable for the location. It is in the center of the Mill Bay Village, very convenient access to the shopping and amenity and public transit. The development concept is in line with the current OCP policies for supporting multifamily housing development. The applicant has provided preliminary technical reports to assess different aspects of the development, including environment, transportation, geotechnical, and drainage. And more detailed technical issues will be addressed through the development permit application process. And staff also recommend including this development into the form and character DPA area of the OCP in order to implement more detailed designs and have more control over the development. And through the internal referral process, a new water source has been identified as critical to the development. And the applicant is currently working with Brentwood College to drill a new well, and they are applying for a new water license, which require Mill Bay Waterworks District as a co-applicant, and also an agreement to expand the water system. Next slide, please. So the recommendation is to advance the application to referral to external agencies and First Nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hang on there for a second. I think there'll probably be some questions. Do you have questions for the staff? Director Abbott?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I noticed in the staff report that Aquifer 206 Mill Bay is there's an extreme deficit. Do you and Brentwood have solutions, answers to how to mitigate an extreme deficit to an aquifer? I see that under those recommendations that you expect to work with Brentwood and the Water District to apply for a license, but is the Achilles heel that there may not be water to tap into, or is it just a matter of a deeper pipe?
Through the chair to Director Estrella. Okay. I think that question may be better to be answered by the applicant because at this time we don't know a lot of technical details regarding this new water license and the technical requirement for the new well. And what we have received so far is based on previous studies of the underlying aquifer, which is being shared with many other properties and developments. So.
Follow-up? Yep.
It perhaps isn't for the applicant, maybe for staff, but I would think that a proposal of this magnitude really depends upon water. Yeah. And I'm wondering why it's not one of the referral agencies that's being reached out to at present. And I had the same question of reaching out to the fire department and egress, road access that they bring up in the comments that accompanied. So I apologize if I'm leaning on the applicant, but water at the outset to me would be a critic for so many units, getting up to about 150 households.
Excellent, thank you. Perhaps there could be amendment towards the end. We'll see what other questions we have. Director Segal?
Thank you, Chair. Is it Mr. Xiao?
Correct, thanks.
Welcome. This is the first time, at least I've been here with you here. I want to thank you in the report for including the Mill Bay Water District and the Mill Bay Fire Improvement District in the preliminary referrals. It's really good to kind of get a sense, but for sure, water is of great concern to my community. Unfortunately, I know CVRSD staff can't provide answers on water. That lies with the Mill Bay Water District. But for our work here, I'm wondering about the proper procedure since it is noted in the Mill Bay Water District's notes that the applicant has not contacted them about a well yet, or they haven't started talks towards an agreement of a well license application. I'm looking for advice from staff if procedurally that should come first, or if there's direction that we've received from the province of like where that should happen. If we should go ahead with these external referrals, which is what you're recommending. I guess just to help me understand why we would move forward when it seems like water is a really important thing to start with. Thanks.
Go ahead, please.
Through the chair to Director Siegel. So my understanding by talking to the provincial, the water license staff, their recommendation is sort of like the two applications, the rezoning and the water license application, kind of need to kind of coordinate with each other, kind of can go in locksteps. It is not absolutely required that the rezoning has to be approved before the water license can be issued. So I think they emphasize on more close communication to see like with each application, with the status, well, how far it had gone, and then they will consider. They will coordinate the review process to help to move the project forward. So,
Follow up? No? Okay. Director Morrison.
Thank you, Chair. I guess in reading the report and considering that we're, how long into a serious housing crisis, and we've got reports later that show our new housing start numbers are pretty deplorable. This is a first blush yay or nay, do we send this out for referrals question, and given the time that the province is going to need to process a water license and the negotiations with the water district and the likes, it doesn't make any sense to me that we would hold back and wait. Our staff have just told us that there's a good rationale from the province to be moving in lockstep together. And it's clearly written in the report that they're not going to get the final zoning until we know about water and a satisfactory agreement reached with the waterworks. So given that this is a, thumbs up or thumbs down, shall we move forward request, and we will get important information back from the referrals. Given that we're in a housing crisis, I think we should be doing everything in our power to ensure that new housing possibilities are given priority and can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Morrison. Director Wilson, did you have a question for staff?
I'll try and work one in there somewhere, I'm sure. Director Morrison brings up a very good point. Let's not put the cart before the horses here. This is pretty straightforward. It's a recommendation that it goes to further consultation, and I'm in agreement with that because we are in a crisis right here. Let's concentrate on what we can do, not what we can't do.
Thank you, Director Wilson. Director Nicholson, please, and then Director Acton after.
Thank you. I am a what kind of a question can I put? Is there a way to strengthen the staff's recommendation on option one that would ensure that there is a partnership with the improvement district, Brentwood, and the developer on the well situation? Because to me, that's very critical if this is going to go ahead. You don't want to have sort of dueling hydrologists arguing about whether there is or is not going to be enough water if they when they put a well in, because they're going to have to put a well in to figure this one out, maybe more than one well. So it just seems to me we need to make sure that there is a partnership process at the beginning moving forward, or else a lot of this will be a waste of time, I think.
Mr. Sale, do you want to take a crack at that?
well, I don't really have the answer to it, but I would say that, yeah, definitely that is possible, but it will depend on the board to make that recommendation. But the staff will certainly will will help to implement and coordinate with the different partners in the application.
Excellent. Thank you. Do you have a follow-up, Director Nicholson?
I think Ms. Pressman has her hand up.
Oh, thank you. Right there. Excellent. Ms. Pressman, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to follow up that could also potentially be a recommendation when this comes back after this first round of referrals. That could be a recommendation of staff to the board for consideration prior to readings or prior to second or third reading of the potential bylaws.
Excellent. Thank you. Director Acton. Oh, sorry, Director Nicholson, you had a follow-up? Yep. Oh, you're on mute, I believe.
I would just like to follow up on that suggestion. I'm wondering what the advantage of waiting would be instead of proceeding now on the waterfront.
Ms. Preston? If you're there.
Through the chair to Director Nicholson, typically we will, at this stage, we're just making a recommendation on referrals and not any conditions of the potential bylaw. We also, part of these referrals is sending a referral to the Ministry of Waterlands and Resource Stewardship, water authorizations branch, and so I'd like to incorporate their feedback as well.
Thank you. Are we good, Director Nicholson? Yeah. Director Acton.
Thank you, Chair. First comment, then question. I think the location is awesome. From the drawings, it looks like a great spot to suit that kind of development, and I think the possibilities there are really exciting. The part that, thinking of the whole community as a whole and where it's located, and with the mall there, my one concern right now would be enough parking for the residents. Overflow of parking going into that mall just would create, future city issues that, we don't want to create. So I guess at what point, this is to staff, at what point would we add a parking requirement into the process here? And can it be part of the zoning? Because zoning to me would be number of residents. So therefore a certain number of residents should have a certain amount of parking.
Yeah, good question, Mr. Sale.
It's
I don't know
through
where
the
that
chair
came from.
to Director Acton. Yeah, the answer is yes. The applicant has provided a preliminary traffic impact assessment looking at traffic impacts and parking requirements. At this point, there are some deficiencies that staff have identified in terms of the parking requirements. So we will be working with the applicant to refine those parking requirements. Certainly, all the parkings will be provided on site, either in the underground parking or on the surface parking within the site. And when the application is ready to move forward for first reading of a draft bylaw, that parking requirement will be included in the draft bylaw for the board to consider.
Follow up? No. Thank you. I don't see any other hands up. I understand we have the applicant here online or in the room. In the room, Daniel Behrens. Hopefully I got that right. If you want to join us at the podium. Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, is this on? Okay, perfect. Thanks so much for having us. My name is Daniel Behrens. I'm with the Purdy Group. So we own the properties in question and are planning to develop it. We're partners in the Mill Bay Marine Group, so we actually own the property at the marina as well. And we were part of the development of the townhouses that are between this development and the marina. And we've owned this property for a while, so we've been planning this development a long time. We're obviously going to be a long-term member of that area. And everything we want to do here is obviously for everyone there to have a place that they want to live. I think the biggest concern for us, and I think everyone here, was the water. And so we've been working on that. I think I met with Kate a year ago before we did this to talk about the water. And so we've been working on that a long time and to address the concerns in the room. I'm not 100% sure why Mill Bay Water said we hadn't met with them. We have met with them. And we've had some discussions. We haven't gotten to the point of an agreement because there's this weird chicken and egg thing with zoning and water licensing. And so you kind of have to walk lockstep, like Luli suggested, where you come down together and one goes first, the next happens. So right now the license is actually applied for. The well has been drilled, it has been tested, and our hydrogeologist is working with Mill Bay Water's hydrogeologist to make sure that there's capacity there for what we're looking to do. So I anticipate that's probably going to happen over the next couple of months. We'll sort that out. There's no way this happens without it. So I think the way it's worded and the way staff have handled that make a lot of sense to us. And it's absolutely what we want to make sure is in place. And so we're partnered with Brentwood College on that. And there will be an agreement with Mill Bay Water. There's no other way to do it because the water has to go through their system to get to our property. This property is landlocked, right? So there's no way to put a well. There's no way for us to handle it any other way. So I think Mill Bay Water's aware of it, and we're hoping that moves ahead positively. And then the other couple concerns I heard was the parking. And we have a marina and a restaurant right there. The last thing we want is to blow up that parking and cause a bunch of issues, along with all the residents, because we have to obviously live and work with them as well. So we had the initial traffic impact study done. We had some comments back from staff. We're in the process of doing another one right now to get a more thorough look at it. So we anticipate that'll be done before these referrals come back, and we'll have a better answer so we can answer those questions as well. And I think that will honestly dictate a lot of what happens on that property because parking will be an issue, as everyone knows, on Handy Road. I think that's all I had. I just wanted to thank the staff. I think it's been excellent working with Michelle and Yuli. They've been very helpful, and we appreciate the support. The water, actually I mentioned the water is in the Housing Accelerator Program with the province. So they've actually been very helpful as well because it's housing related. They've fast-tracked that. So we're hopeful that this process, once we get the agreement with Mill Bay Water, it'll be a relatively quick process to get the license and then the zoning and then build. So yeah, I don't know if there's any other questions.
That's great. Thanks, Mr. Burns. Did you have a question? Yeah. Director Segal, please.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Mr. Behrens. Nice to see you again. I just wanted to clarify on the note where you mentioned that the application has been submitted for the water license, and I know where the well is, Brentwood College owns that property. So I assume it's an application between Brentwood College and the Mill Bay Water District. And I spoke with the Mill Bay Water District Chair, and he was not aware of an application. So I just want to get clarity on if a water license application has been submitted or not.
So yeah, it's a good question. So it has been submitted. It's a very confusing process, and I think there's some confusion between a bunch of the parties. And so the application is actually between ourselves, Brentwood, and the province. As that process goes through, Mill Bay Water has to come on as a co-applicant. So before they'll even really look at it, like we put it in just to get it in so the province knew it was coming. They probably, I can't speak for them, but my guess is they won't do much until Mill Bay Water comes on board as a co-applicant. And so they're aware of that situation. Like we've been talking, again, I think I reached out to Callie at the province 18 months ago and started that discussion. So everyone's kind of aware of it, but it's just these process steps that have to happen. And so I met with Gary, the chair of Mill Bay Water, maybe mid-December, just to give him an update of where we were, because there's been a big changeover in Mill Bay Water. I was just really sure you're aware. So there was a group that we were talking to. It's flipped. There's a new chair, a new board. I met with Gary and one of his board members and his operator and gave him an update of where we're at. And he really wants to meet, but he doesn't want to meet until we have the hydrogeology report, because that kind of dictates everything, and that's fair. So that's really what we're waiting for right now, is that report. Then we meet with Gary, determine what the next steps are, and go to the province.
Thank you. Follow-up? No? Director Wilson.
Yeah, Kate's already asked the question and it's been answered. Thank you.
First, Director Nicholson online, and then Director Abbott. Director Nicholson? Oh, you're muted.
you.
There you go.
Oh, I'm
You're good now.
Thank you. I'm thinking about the housing that you're providing. I think that's a really good site for densification, but I am wondering about whether it is all market housing, I'm assuming, and I'm wondering if there's any rental in there proposed.
Yeah, good question. So we are working through what we're going to do right now. Obviously, with the way the world is right now, it's a little volatile. If this goes as quick as we think it can, there'll likely be rentals. But there's programs out there right now with the CMHC and the provincial government that are assisting in those rentals. And we kind of need to catch them because the land and the construction costs right now are so high that without them, it's hard to do rentals. We want to do rentals, but to do it, it has to be financially viable. So not saying we want to rush this through, but if we can do it in that process and the programs stay that are in right now, we will do rentals. How much? I'm not 100% sure. We haven't figured that out, but there will be some there.
Director Nicholson, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, so is there any possibility of any affordable housing?
Most of those, I can't comment 100% right now because of the situation with the status of the project, but most of those programs require that in different levels and different requirements.
Thank you. Director Abbott.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Behrens. And lest we get tarred with trying to slow down development, that is not the intention here, and it does look like a very choice location. My family has been involved in Mill Bay since the early 80s, and what your proponents, your boss, the Purdy Group, plan on doing will just accentuate that. However, it's probably timely to ask at the outset about things like parking, water, as you've already addressed thoroughly, and fire access and egress. I live in an area that has put in a one-way route in for fire egress, and the fire department is quite perturbed with that decision. It was all great when the development was on paper, and on paper, you've built a very compelling case about the cross-section of people that will live on this site. And if a lot of people are retired, I could see perhaps a third of a car, 2/3 of a car. But if there's a component, and encourage that there's going to be another traffic analysis, please, I encourage you to do an in-depth. If people are going to work in either towards Nanaimo or Victoria, they're going to need a car and a half. And I just did the rough numbers. That does not seem to be enough parking, and a very tight streetscape with cars parked out in front with the odd RV or camper. So I just encourage you to, at this early outset, really delve deep into the traffic analysis. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, and we feel the same way, so we are definitely going to be taking a hard look at that. I forgot to mention, I remember the fire comment, and we will definitely, that was a comment that came back that we're addressing, so we will not be building something the fire department doesn't want to go save people, so 100% we'll be addressing those comments.
Follow-up? You good? Excellent, thank you. I don't see any other hands or questions. I'll turn to the director of the area.
Thank you. I'd like to move the staff recommendation with the addition of the Mill Bay Water District and the Mill Bay Fire Improvement District.
It's been moved.
Seconded?
Seconded.
Sorry.
You're not the chair.
Sorry.
Would you like to speak to the
Yes,
motion?
I'd like to speak to it. Thank you.
Please proceed.
Okay, so yeah, this proposed development is really well situated. It's within the growth containment boundary. It's within service areas for water and sewer. It's close to transit and essential amenities. It's exactly the kind of thoughtful densification I think that benefits our community. Increased housing options in Mill Bay will ease the pressure on the housing market and contribute to a more sustainable tax base. That said, as we've heard around the table, there's some significant concerns that need to be addressed. So I really look forward to seeing what the external referrals come back with and how this can move forward in a sustainable way.
Thank you. Do we have any other discussion? Okay. Do you? Yeah. Well, with that, we'll call it. Do you have the motion? Do you want to? Yeah. I think it's It's my first motion. Let's go all the way.
I think the use out of the parliamentarian today, that's all right. That it be recommended to the board that application number RZ 24A02 746 750 754 760 and 766 Handy Road and 2673 and 2691 Mill Bay Road, PIDs 001 293 605 000-697-770, 001-293-648, 001-293-613, 001-293-630, 001-293-621, 001-349-325 be referred to the following external agencies and First Nations: Ministry of Transportation and Transit, Ministry of Land, Water and Resource Stewardship, Water Authorizations, Ecosystems, Fish Habitat, BC Hydro, Cowichan Valley School District 79, Electoral Area A, Mill Bay Malahat Advisory Planning Commission, Electoral Area A, Mill Bay Malahat Parks Advisory Commission, Cowichan Tries, Subasek, Suminis First Nation, Sayout First Nation, Sartlip First Nation, Paquachin First Nation, Sekim First Nation, Samak, my apologies, Treaty Association, Mill Bay Fire Department, Mill Bay Waterworks District,
Thank you.
Malahat Nation.
Thank you, Ms. Boyd. I call the question. All in favor? I can't see who's online. It looks like it carries. Yeah. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Look forward to working with you all.
And my apologies, I should have let you sit down while we were reading that out. Excellent. Moving on to R2, report from the Community Planning Division regarding Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 2025 Engagement Plan. Miss.
Just bear with me for a second. It's my first time playing with these buttons.
Sure.
Sure.
You got your screen, so you're good. Hit share. And then very top left. There you go. I'm going to click on the screen when it comes up. Maybe? There we go. I'll just click on the screen because you're probably going to be moving this if you use the arrow keys.
Great.
There you go.
Okay,
Use the
perfect.
arrows.
Thank you.
Ms. Wright?
All right, thanks for having me. So this is a comprehensive zoning bylaw update regarding the project charter. So the original project charter was endorsed in 2023, and we're now looking to update it in order to finalize the CZB project. So just a quick recap of last fall, the public engagement included major updates to the Plan Your Cowichan webpage for the in relation to the CZB project, which included agricultural zoning that was introduced on the webpage, along with an interactive web map that shows your zoning for agricultural zones only, the current zoning, as well as the proposed zoning. And that map will be updated as future zones become available. 2 online surveys, one related to agricultural zoning and the other related to general questions pertaining to the CZB. Booths at 2 Duncan Farmers Markets to discuss the CZB within the community and promote the surveys, as well as 2 public engagement meetings regarding agricultural zoning, and then summary reports for both the surveys along with the public engagement meeting. So in terms of project charter updates, we'll be talking about APC meetings, First Nations engagement, public open houses, and bylaw readings. So really we're working towards adoption of the CZB in the spring of 2025, and that's final adoption, not first reading. So APC, we're proposing APC meetings in 2 separate phases. We realize that when you consult on a project that's so big that it would be helpful for APCs to really break it down a little. So in this case, we are hoping that in this spring that we go to APCs with residential, rural residential, agriculture, and forestry zones. And then in the fall of 2025, we'll go with commercial, industrial, parks, institutional, and water zones, and that includes the associated general regulations or the related general regulations with those topics as well. So for each phase, we would host a hybrid meeting in this boardroom. The hybrid meeting would be recorded. We'd invite all APC members from every APC to attend. They could attend either in the boardroom or virtually at that time. And the goal is to record that meeting so that any APC member who's not able to attend that date can watch the meeting At that meeting, we would be talking in depth about each of these topics, residential, rural residential, agriculture, and we go through it for the entire region. The reason we're choosing, or we're proposing this way, is because this is a regional zoning bylaw. It's important for each electoral area to know what's happening in other electoral areas, and that for us to start thinking in the APC fashion as a whole, as opposed to piecemeal by electoral area. You have to remember that when we are amalgamating is kind of the right word, when you're bringing in zones, for instance, the R1 zone in Area A and the R1 zone in Area H, and this is just an example off the top of my head. When we bring them in all and put them in the same zone, it's going to say the same thing, but for two separate electoral areas, meaning we want to have the conversation like that as a whole, or we want to introduce the information like that as a whole. So after this meeting's recorded, we're going to set up dates with each electoral area APC individually. And at that point, we would have a regular APC meeting where we'd hope that the APC members come, they've reviewed the information, they've attended the meeting or watched the previous recording, and come with the questions and able to discuss the proposed zones and provide recommendations to the board through or provide their recommendation at the end of that meeting. So, sorry, let me just catch up because I went off my notes here. And so along with that, at the same time, should this public charter or project charter be endorsed, we'd be sending letters to the First Nations this month describing the project and inviting them to participate in an engagement process. We understand that each First Nation has different abilities and desires on how they would like to be engaged, so we would be cognizant of that through this process, which is why we can't give specific information yet. So after APC meetings, we would take that or take those comments, make changes to the zones that we had presented at that time, and then present at the public open houses in the winter what we've come up with for the CZB to the community. So we're proposing along the same lines of, if you go back to 2020, when the HOCP project was getting off, there was the public open house meetings at several locations throughout the Cowichan Valley, and that's, I won't say it's going to be exactly that because that was a different type of presentation, but that's kind of what we're thinking. Really large-scale open houses where we introduce the zones. Although we're proposing for the open houses and splitting them between electoral areas, once again, it is a regional, or it's an electoral area-wide zoning bylaw, meaning you would be able to go, if you're in Area G, you would be able to go to the Area DE meeting and you'd receive the same information. So that's kind of our hope for the winter of 2025. So public input, we haven't thought through this yet, so we would, or thought through the details, I should say, but we'd be receiving input at these events, probably like what we did before through surveys at the events and through our Plan Your Cowichan webpage. In regards to the timeline, bylaw readings, we're hoping this time next year, we'd be standing here with requesting or recommending first reading and referrals. And I mean, throughout this process, we are engaging with different agencies as it is, the Ministry of Agriculture, the ALC, through that. So the referrals to these agencies, the majority of them shouldn't come as a surprise when they get them for a formal referral comments. It would be information that we would already have discussed with them. So this time next year, we're going to be hoping to be standing in front of you for recommendation of first reading and referrals, and with working towards bylaw adoption by latest in the spring of 2026. We will most likely require a public hearing. A zoning bylaw does not require a public hearing if it's completely in line with an OCP. However, there most likely will be some discrepancies here and there, and to err on the side of caution, a public hearing will most likely be happening at some point in the late winter, early spring of 2026. In terms of budget, we are on track with this project. Last year, we overestimated how much we were going to spend, meaning we've requested and we're granted an $80,000 carryover from the 2024 funds to 2025. So we didn't spend approximately $80,000 of what we had budgeted, and so we intend on spending that this year. The majority of that will go to consultants. Last year we had, during our engagement events, we had Land Art Consulting helping with helping with the engagement. They helped a lot with the formatting of the website, with the editing, with the packages. So for instance, the summary report, they were the ones that did that. So they would be doing similar work alongside us this year. We also just the public engagement, the events themselves cost some money. So that's where that money would be going towards. And that's it for this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. Director Wilson, please go ahead.
Oh, that was quick. Thank you very much, Lauren. One of the things that came up more than once, not just from the speaker at public input there, but certainly when I've been talking with the farming community who's been contacting me, is that their concerns, while being heard, are not really being acted on. And one of the things that that really worries me at the moment is, with the possibility of tariffs causing more significant cost of living increases, it becomes more urgent to address the farmers' concerns. Can you tell me what the status is of the AAC, the formation of that? Are we going to go forward with that? Is that part of this, as it was brought forward in public input there?
So I might turn to,
Yep, that's right. Go.
through the director, or through the chair to the director. That is outside the scope of the zoning bylaw. I might turn to Ms. Cheryl to provide actual comment.
Ms. Cheryl? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. There is a board resolution on file directing that staff come back with a report following some work on regional planning, and that work is expected to occur later this year, likely Q3. So it'll be towards the end of this year that we bring back a report and discussion around Agricultural Committee.
Thank you. Did you have anything you want to add? No? You're good? You good, Director Wilson? No follow-up? Yeah, excellent. Director Nicholson, and then Director Morrison.
Oh, I think Director Morrison was ahead of me.
Oh, all right. Director Morrison, go ahead, please.
I'm going to go, thanks, Chair. I'm going to go a little off topic here because, I see this great work that's being done. Staff are fully engaged. We've put so much work and effort into the harmonization and modernization of our OCP, and now we're bringing together the complementary zoning to go with it. And it may just be me, but I'm sort of picking up on a little bit of resident consultation fatigue, and there's a lot of effort and good work in reaching out and engaging our communities, and we're looking at a Q1, Q2 of 2026 for drawing this to a close and going to readings of bylaws. But I'm concerned that we're also engaging in this regional planning function, and that we've really taken a big step going from the different OCPs to consolidating, and the different zoning bylaws to consolidating, and then the next step is to go to regional growth strategy. And I'm wondering if there's staff that can perhaps comment on or address if there's going to be a break, or we're going to have concurrent wrapping up of the zoning bylaw work that Ms. Pressman and her people or Ms. Wright is doing, and are we overlapping on the regional growth work that's being done by others in the department? So I'd love to hear a timeline. We're talking about charter for this. How does that overlap with the regional planning work that's being done that Ms. Chiralfa just mentioned a moment or two ago?
I'm guessing that's a question for Ms. Chiralfa.
Thank you, Chair. So, yes, we have a lot going on, and no, we're not really going to stop. We don't ever stop. But I will say that in terms of timing around public engagement on major plans and strategies, it's my expectation that the zoning bylaw work would be wrapped up prior to any significant public engagement on regional growth strategy. So there should be a bit of a break. Should the board decide to formally initiate that strategy soon, then that work will start. But there's a lot of background work that has to happen internally before we would be prepared to go out broadly to the public. So there's a bit of a natural progression that would happen in terms of engagement. And I would also like to add that I know there's a fair bit of frustration out in the community, particularly recently with everything that's happening south of the border. And, we're very sensitive to that. And one of the things that we're endeavoring to do is to work more closely with the communications team here to get information out about, what's possible today under regulations and what may be possible in the future, because things are changing. Things will change through the zoning bylaw project, and just kind of to keep the hope alive for folks. There's a lot of positive things happening, and we need to be mindful of that.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I do. And thank you for that, Mr. Elfin. And I guess this is where the intersection between the operational and work that your staff are doing in the political, because there's significant pressure for our regional district to begin to realize some of the benefits of the HOCP, MOCP, and comprehensive zoning bylaw work, so that we can maybe reverse the fortunes of our lagging new home starts stats that we'll be seeing a little later on. And I guess it's more of a comment that I have grave concerns that we will complete the comprehensive zoning bylaw and be rushing, and I know you say there could be a natural break, but rushing headlong into that regional planning strategy and another planning exercise. So my question, I think, is really, will we be getting something that we can line up beside this charter, as far as a charter graph that shows us, what the anticipated regional growth work? I think you've given us a little bit, but what a timeline and a charter for a regional growth strategy would look like, and glad to hear that we're not fully committed headlong into that yet. But I'd like to see something that shows the two, because it feels like we're going from the completion of one very significant project for electoral areas into another, and we may need a little bit more of a pause on that than we're anticipating right now.
Thank you, Director Morrison. You're stretching your legs a little bit on that one, but I'll let Ms. Chow do her best, and then maybe a follow-up offline might be more appropriate.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the directors, Director Morrison. Once we're able to initiate on the RGS, the steering committee will meet and formalize or strategize really around timelines and a work plan, and then that would be brought back to the committee for consideration at that time. I envision that, it would be really nice to be able to show you graphically or visually how things line up, similar to what we've done in the past between the OCP and zoning projects. So, I anticipate we'll be able to do that in the coming months.
Thank you. Excellent. Pretty good. Director Nicholson, do you have a question for staff?
I do, thank you. I have two questions. One is around the agriculture, and the other is around the timeline. We've gone out to the community and had extra consultation on agricultural issues, and we had incredible turnout from our farming community, and a real interest and engagement in that. And I know that some of the things that there was a fairly there were certain things that we talked to them about, and there are other things that are covered in the zoning bylaw that we did not have an opportunity to cover with them. I am wondering if there is an opportunity to set up an agricultural advisory commission that can work on the same timeline as the APC is doing to look at the agricultural zoning material? Because I really feel strongly that the APCs are not necessarily qualified. I know my AP, agriculture is a huge thing in Area E, and I do not feel like my APC drawn from across the electoral area really reflects the breadth of the farming that goes on in the electoral area. So I'm just wondering if that is at all possible.
Ms. Wright, you want to take a crack at that?
I'll take a little crack, and then I'm sure Ms. Cheryl will continue. So at this point, there's been no direction from the board for the zoning bylaw project to take that direction. So we would be looking, we'd need to consider that, and as well as along the timeline of if we did go that route, how long it takes to appoint people to this type of committee and what role they would play in it. However, I'll also ask Ms. Cheryl if she would like to contribute.
Yeah, sorry, Ms.
The
Cheryl.
chair is looking at me.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Chair.
I didn't want to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, as I said before, there is a board resolution on the books directing when, at which time the regional agriculture committee question should be considered. And so that's really a question for the board. I would sort of remind directors that the process that is outlined in the updated draft project charter speaks to all zones. It's a comprehensive zoning bylaw. So we are obviously concerned about agricultural zoning and regulations, and we spent a lot of time in that this fall, but we really need to get into the other areas, the residential zones, commercial zones, the industrial zones, the general regulations. There's a lot of work to do, and I think we'd like to continue that momentum as Lauren has suggested.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Truff. A follow-up, Director Nicholson?
Yeah, I have another question, but I'd just like could Ms. Charoff remind me when we will be seeing a yes or no on an agricultural commission? What was the timeline?
I think Q3 was mentioned.
So I think that through you, Chair, I think that I had mentioned Q3. There's we need to do some work around regional planning service feasibility prior to coming back to the board with that information.
So that means it wouldn't be helpful at all for this comprehensive zoning bylaw input.
I'm not sure. Was that a question for Ms. Truff?
Yes, that's a question, please.
I mean, I'm not sure how to respond to the question. I think it's a political question.
Sure. Yeah. I'm not sure that...
Timelines don't line up. My point is...
Ms. Wright,
I just wanted to say, though, a zoning bylaw, especially once we have it all the zoning bylaws are one in a comprehensive zoning bylaw, it'll be much easier to for any amendment to initiate through staff as well as in communities. So I don't necessarily see it as a complete negative that an agriculture advisory committee may not be established in time to inform this zoning, the first round of the zoning bylaw, because staff will have much more time once it's adopted, and we will be able to kind of come back piecemeal. Yeah. Although it's not the best answer, I know everyone kind of would like the best. We're going for the best document we can give you first round. However, a zoning bylaw is not stagnant ever. Right. So keep that in mind as well.
Rough draft and then improve. Excellent.
I wouldn't say rough draft.
Or first draft.
Yeah, a great first draft, but always room for improvement in any zoning bylaw.
Yep. Thank you. One last follow-up, Director Nicholson. You got your hand up still.
I do. Yes, thank you. I recognize that. But it does speak to my next question is, you have the public open houses in Q4, and then you plan to come out with the bylaw in Q1 of 2026. And I guess my question is, do you expect there to be public input? And I think that you do, when I read the report, I think I read that you do expect input. So if things were to blow up on something like agriculture, it might be more time well spent to focus on that. Yeah. Do you think you have enough time for public input at the open houses?
Ms. Wright?
I do think we have enough time. And in terms of agriculture, so what we, the zoning bylaw has to follow the policies of the OCP at the time, hopefully the MOCP. And so that's really what we've based our regulations on. And that's what we're going to continue to base them on. So I can understand that sometimes it's not agreed upon in the public what the zone exactly says. However, we can't defer from the policies of the MOCP or the OCP of the day. So we do, when public consultation does occur in next winter, or this winter, I should say, we will have time to really sit down with it because the zoning bylaw will be completely drafted at that time. So at that point, it's complete editing and going back and things, which is what we're kind of coming to face with right now, is that we're working on agriculture on the side in the morning and then working on something else in the afternoon, things like that. That won't be the case. Once we have all the comments from the public, we'll be able to go through it more systematically, whereas right now it's not quite as black and white as that.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. That's great. Director Martman, do you have a question for staff?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm doing wonderful, by the way. And I do support what Director Nicholson's saying. And, I think at times when you see the project charter and the way it's laid out, the timelines, staff, are best to recommend how it will flow. But I guess the concern I have is the real need of the voice of agriculture in the Cowichan Valley to be heard on a regular basis. And I think staff have really done well in terms of trying to respond to the board's direction on this. But I would like to see if there's any way they can come up with even an interim idea of how this might happen before this gets completed. And even a suggestion that perhaps, I know if I speak on my half of my APC, there's at least 3 farmers on it. And there may be a way to create a subcommittee of commissions that represent across all the different APCs that have a farmer or a farmer that could maybe help provide some input or provide a voice. So it's just a thought. And I guess I'm just trying to support Director Nicholson and the voice of farming community out there that this is terribly important. So that's just one thing. My question is, I guess that is a question. Is there any other ways that we could try to do something that would be providing a voice?
Yeah, Ms. Wright, I think we'd probably need some sort of motion on that unless we want to just give that to staff for information to come back with a recommendation. But I don't know. Do you want to? Yeah.
Chair. So I will observe that it's a little bit late in the process of developing policy to implement a committee that would be focused on policy level discussion when we're in the process of drafting zoning bylaws, as Wright has noted, to implement the standing OCP. And that's not to say that the concerns of the sector aren't important, but I think that we do have an opportunity through other mechanisms to both elicit information, but also to get information out to the public and to the farming community. I heard today some comments that were not completely accurate. So we have bylaws that, in fact, do allow agritourism activities, and perhaps that's not well understood. And so we perhaps need to do a better job of explaining what actually can be done on farmlands within the ALR so that it is clear. And, we can just do that through better communication separate and apart from this project. And lastly, I will say that through a regional growth strategy process, there will also be an opportunity to look comprehensively at regional policy for things such as agriculture. And that's important because once a regional growth strategy is in place, then all of the municipal OCPs and the CBRD's OCP have to align with that and would have to be amended to align with regional policy. And then in turn, the zoning bylaws get updated to align with the OCPs. So there's a natural progression. As Lauren's noted, this is kind of the first stab at creating a comprehensive zoning bylaw for the electoral areas, but it's going to be an iterative document that's not intended to be cast in stone. It's going to be adjusted over time to meet communities' needs.
Thank you, Ms. Stroff. You're doing good in the firing line. Director Martin, do you have a follow-up to that one or a different question?
Yeah, thank you. I do have a follow-up, and I do appreciate and thank staff because I do know they're hearing this, and sometimes I come from left field and appreciate them being able to navigate that. The question, I guess, then the concern, I guess, that raises for me is really making sure that this project charter can flow. And I look at one of the risks that is identified under the MOCP being completed timely. And how do we, how does the board, how does the committee get best informed if there are things that are threatening that completion that will impact this project charter? So that was my last question. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Morrison. We're getting a little far away, I think, from what was to be discussed, but maybe we just take a quick crack at that one, just if we're able. I know it's a little.
So through the chair to the director, I can't quite speak about the MOCP timeline. We do know it has been presented, and the MOCP has received first reading, and they are right now out for the MOCP is out for referral comments. However, I do know that in terms of what the project charter states, and is that even if the MOCP is not going along the timeline that is anticipated, this project charter can still move forward until, but the thing is, it would not be able to be adopted until the MOCP is adopted because it's built to be in line with the policies of the MOCP. So really, that would be the only holding block of this zone CZB project being finalized, would be the ultimate adoption of the MOCP. It doesn't mean we can't keep working on it.
Makes sense to me. Thank you. Director Martin, did you have another?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. And the reason I bring it up, though, it is identified under risk identification in the charter. That's why I brought it up. Thanks.
Thank you. Makes sense. Director Morrison, and then maybe we'll look to somebody can make a motion after you have a few questions.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't want to be at all seen to be, slighting the importance of agriculture in this comprehensive zoning bylaw. But, looking at when we first considered the Agriculture Committee and doing the additional consultation and engagement with the community, this is a document that is being, with the charter being put forward, that's all of our zoning in all of our electoral areas. And as important as agriculture is, so is industrial zoning, so is light industrial zoning, so are those other zones that we are in desperate need of creating and identifying other zones and other land uses that are critically important. And I'm just going to go back to the housing crisis again, and the development community is requiring certainty of its local government so that we can begin to attract not only industrial activity, housing activity, and the likes. And if we are going to continue to try and make perfect certain segments of this document, it's going to be extended not only into Q3, or Q2 and Q3, and even further if we don't give staff the charter and the tools to put a bow on this and bring back that excellent first, I'm not going to call it rough, but first draft, so that we can have a document that will provide certainty to the people that are coming here to do business and to farm and to set up new factories and to build homes in the community. So I just like to, broaden our view again and remember it's all of our zones for all 9 electoral areas, and staff have given us a plan here, and I think it's something that we should endorse. And with that, I'll move the recommendation if it's appropriate, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, it's been seconded. I think, do you have anything else you'd like to add? No, good. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. I thought we'd be going a little quicker with me not talking, but somehow it's taken an hour and 15 minutes to get through 2 items. So I think maybe 10-minute recess is in order. Is there anything else I need to do? No? That's great. We'll be back. Thank you. Welcome back. Ms. Boyd, we're on to R3.
Yes, thank you, Chair. R3, report from the Utilities Division regarding British Columbia water meter pilot project application.
I believe Ms. Thompson? Yeah.
Press the button. Okay, thank you. So this report, we're proposing an application to the British Columbia water meter pilot project. The program presents a significant opportunity to modernize water infrastructure in 3 of our CBRD water systems. This is a $50 million initiative funded by the provincial government to assist smaller communities in implementing water metering projects. Eligible projects include the purchase and installation of water meters for unmetered single-family residential connections. Some of the requirements: meters must collect hourly data and transmit it to a centralized collection point via advanced metering infrastructure, or AMI. The funding covers up to 100% of eligible costs to a maximum of $5 million per project. So as part of the provincial pilot project, participating communities will be expected to collect and share data on water production and consumption throughout the pilot project. They'll also be required to participate in a research project and a community of practice aimed at collaboration and knowledge exchange, becoming partners in helping the provincial government pursue ultimate goals of the pilot project. Communities will help shape provincial best practices and provide insights for other BC water systems considering metering in the future. Its collaborative approach will support water conservation, system efficiency, and improve management across the province. This project would help to implement advanced metering infrastructure in 3 CBRD water systems that are currently unmetered or partially unmetered. Total number of connections affected would be 860 single-family residential connections, and the total estimated cost of the project is $2.57 million. There's several benefits that this would provide. So improved water conservation would provide customers with
frequent and accurate information about their water use and encourage conservation. Leak detection, advanced metering infrastructure can help identify leaks faster for customers as well as operators, and identify water loss, as well as fair billing, improving equity across the system, reduce staff time for meter reading, and informed decision making. So data collected through advanced metering infrastructure supports better water planning and asset management. Anticipated award for this program is mid-February, and we have made in advance an application to meet the program deadline of January 30th. So yeah, again, this is opportunity to modernize water systems and water metering infrastructure, improve operational efficiency, and better serve residents. Furthermore, it offers access to technical support, procurement guidance, and opportunity for knowledge sharing with other communities across the province. And I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Got a speakers list growing. Director Nicholson, Wilson, Morrison, then we've got Abbott and Deck. Director Nicholson, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Thompson. This is a really good grant application project. So I guess my question is really, which systems would be benefiting from this, and how did you decide?
Thank you. Through the chair to Director Nicholson. So the three systems that CVRD water systems that have remaining unmetered connections are Arbutus Ridge, a portion of Cary Village, and Missachi Lake. And so all of the other systems are currently fully metered, and that was one of the eligibility requirements for the program. We would have loved to seen the ability to retrofit existing meters with the advanced metering infrastructure, but that was not part of the program.
Follow up? Good. Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thank you, Vanessa. That's good stuff. I'm a great believer in this metering. Braithwaite, which we're on, the improvement district, is fully metered, not as advanced as yours. I think the truck has to drive by and get the RFID off. But from this particular thing, so we're looking at 2.57 million for all three of those systems. The biggest one, obviously, is Arbutus Ridge, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and so I think you mentioned $5 million per project, or did I mishear that one?
Yeah.
So we're well within their $5 million.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, it's the funding is up to $5 million per project.
Good
available.
stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Director Morrison.
Hi there. This is a bit of a challenging one for me. First of all, I completely support metering. I think the new technology is fantastic, saves on staff time, all of that stuff. But I'm having a bit of a challenge in, absolutely for Arbutus, the other ones mentioned, and I would support going to meter a small system like Missachi as well. Obviously, it's not going to be a big chunk of this this overall application, but it raises an issue that I'm going to sort of throw a bit of a lead out here to my colleagues, and maybe even ask if staff has any information on what the used to be Community Works funds, but the funding that's available for water systems and asset management infrastructure improvements. And the reason why I'm asking is that Island Health has just come down and ordered, I think, ultraviolet treatment on a system that had no treatment up until last year. And we had to put chlorination onto the system, and now they've added an additional request for ultraviolet. And I'm hard pressed to be able to go to the community of 70 users and tell them that Island Health has ordered $140,000 worth of work to be done on the system. We don't have any grant funding available yet. We're going to come along and put brand new fancy fandangled meters on their system. You know, if you see the irony in that is we can't afford to put the treatment on, but through a grant, we're going to be able to afford to put a monitoring system in place. So maybe through to our finance staff, have there been any new round of fundings announced, and are there means by which directors can recommend allocations to small systems that can't afford upgrades that are mandated?
Ms. Bone, you're on the spot.
Does that work? Hi. Through the chair to Director Morrison. So in March, the Finance Division will be bringing the gas tax, the Community Works Fund report and policy to you guys, and some recommendations in there on some of the current funding on what we should be using towards projects that we're aware of right now.
Follow up.
Well, throw me a lifeline here. Is it a remote possibility that a small community system like Missachi might be eligible for something like a mandated UV upgrade?
Through the chair to Director Morrison, yes, that is going to be one of the projects I'm going to propose be brought forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Morrison. We have Director Abbott.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Thompson, for a great report. Concur with other directors' comments. Can you just clarify the AMI? You cannot advocate or install AMI on the older system, and if not, what kind of costs are we looking at to get that AMI up and running?
Ms. Thompson.
Through the chair to Director Abbott. Yeah, so through this funding opportunity, we can't use it for systems that are already metered. We can, of course, like you mentioned, upgrade those systems later for the advanced metering infrastructure. We had a really short timeline on this application process, so we haven't fully. We had a couple cost estimates that we came up with, but we haven't fully explored all of the, I guess, available solutions that are out there. But part of that is through the pilot project is the provincial government has partnered with a consulting firm to administer this project, and like that community of practice they have where they can help identify the best solutions for that. And so that would be our hope eventually, is that we could, through various other future funding opportunities, expand the system into our other areas. But this does provide some of the upfront infrastructure costs towards that. Yeah, there's a network of radio towers and things involved, so this would provide at least a start towards that.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson.
Follow up?
And yes, thank you, Chair. But at the end of the day, everybody that's using CVRD water will be metered, either with a more labor-intensive or the advanced metering. You won't be getting free use of water or unfettered use of water.
Yes, that's correct. And just I just wanted to comment on Director Morrison's comments as well a little, just on that same vein. Our water, we already have to measure the water that's used, even if the individual residents aren't metered. As we know, we have groundwater licensing and surface water licensing now, and we do have to report annually to the province on the use of that. So that's something we have to do. And to Director Morrison's point about increased regulations for treatment and things like that, this helps like identifying leaks and identifying losses in the system that would, otherwise be, say, we have to chlorinate now or we have to do UV now. So that's saved chemical addition or saved energy usage that would otherwise just be lost through system leaks that we might go unidentified for a long period of time.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Director Deck.
Thank you, Chair. My question's been answered.
Okay, excellent. I don't see any other hands up. Recommendation's been moved, seconded. All in favor? Any opposed? The motion carries. We're averaging roughly a recommendation every 45 minutes, so we've got 3 left to go. Let's see if we can get out of here before 5. R4, report from the Community Planning Division regarding short-term rental regulations. Mr. Tippett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Michelle. You're perfectly queued up on time. This report is simply for information purposes. There's been some discussion with various directors and so forth about the confusion out in the community around Bill 35 short-term rental regulations. So the aim of this presentation is for both me in the first part of the presentation and later Ian McDonald to touch on what we're doing, what our progress is, and what our understanding of Bill 35 is. So anyway, the first slide here. Sorry, it's such a cluttered slide, but it's a complicated issue. So short-term rental provisions under Bill 35 only apply to properties where single detached dwelling, as we now call it in our zoning bylaws, is the principal permitted use in the zone. And where an entire dwelling is rented short-term. Now that itself is slightly nuanced because the province actually considers bed and breakfast to be short-term rentals, which we found out yesterday in a presentation that we attended online. So it's not entirely correct anyway. But the main point is that any provision under Bill 35 only applies to a parcel of land if single detached dwelling is the principal permitted use and the actual property itself is rented in its entirety to a third party, sort of for a short term, less than 90-day period of time. In the red here, it says, we note that the CVRD bylaws do not permit short-term rentals in almost all zones, neither in the main dwelling nor in a suite or anything else. There are other zones that are not subject to the first sentence in this slide here, like C4 tourist commercial, where short-term rental is the intended use. Single detached dwellings not a permitted use typically in those zones, and they're hotel rooms, so they're expected to be short-term rentals, and they're actually exempted from Bill 35. So again, you have to almost think of it as a hierarchy of sorts where the fundamental thing is, does the zone permit short-term rental use? Yes, no. If the answer is no, you're done. Bill 35 doesn't apply. If the answer is yes, then there are other rules that might apply. So at the bottom of this slide, there's 4 bullet points that highlight 4 of the zones where short-term rentals are permitted. Now, the thing about these various zones is none of them uses the term short-term rental as such, but staff have reviewed the details of the regulations, and all of these zones have one thing in common, which is commercial rentals of some sort that are of a short-term nature plus full-time residential use are simultaneously permitted in these 4 zones. Next slide, please, Michelle. Now, here's the kicker that kind of came up yesterday in our session that Ian and I think Ann attended part of it as well. The province, through Bill 35, also considers bed and breakfast to be short-term rental. CVRD bylaws, however, in the bold here, do not consider bed and breakfast to be short-term rental. We consider it a separate use, and we have a series of detailed regulations in the general regulation section of every zoning bylaw that deals specifically with bed and breakfast. So that's a fairly widespread permitted use in single detached dwelling zones. So from our bylaws perspective, typically it permits up to 4 bedrooms to be rented out in a dwelling, not the whole dwelling, rented to individual guests where the permanent residents who live in the dwelling are present during the rental of the bedrooms. And so it's distinct from the entire dwelling being rented out. This kind of use, as described in these bullet points, is considered conforming to our bylaws. It's not something that we're particularly concerned about. but it does interface or interlace with Bill 35 in a few ways. One of the ways that it interfaces with Bill 35 is because the province considers bed and breakfasts to be short-term rental, their interdiction of online advertisements for what we call short-term rentals in our bylaws and bed and breakfast are going to apply simultaneously. So if someone operates a bed and breakfast, to take an example in Cowichan Bay, they're going to be required to get permission from the province, and I'll describe that a bit later in this presentation, to advertise it online, even though our zoning permits it. And similarly, someone who wants to do a short-term rental where the entire dwelling's rented out, which, as I said earlier, only is permitted in 4 zones in our entire region, they too will require approval from the province. So it is kind of confusing just because the province has combined bed and breakfast with what we call short-term rental in our little sphere here. So regional districts were empowered through Bill 35 to, for the first time, do business licensing for the purpose of short-term rentals and bed and breakfast. And I'll just note here that the business licensing aspect of this, Ian will be talking to this particular point after my presentation here. So I won't get into any particular depth on that right now. Last bullet on this page is, well, I already touched on that because I jumped ahead. So Michelle, you can go to the next page. It's just about registration of both bed and breakfast and short-term rental to go online for advertisements. Now, principal residence requirement. This is something that has in the past been confused, opting into a principal residence requirement or not opting in. The default for regional district electoral areas is they are not opted in. They can choose to opt into a principal residence requirement. The principal residence requirement only is of any relevance whatsoever in the entire consideration of Bill 35 if short-term rentals are permitted use in the zone. If it is not a permitted use in the zone, opting in to a principal residence requirement doesn't mean it's suddenly permitted. The zoning, if it says it's not a permitted use, it's not permitted. So where we have opted in to a principal residence requirement, and I think there are 6 electoral areas, we have, if there is a zone in any of those 6 electoral areas where short-term rental is a permitted use, as in the first slide where I was showing those 4 bullets with the different zones that it is permitted, the only way people who own one of those units can do short-term rentals is if it is their principal residence normally. And by that it means they live there normally and their mail comes there and that is considered to be where they live. Now, they don't have to live there when the short-term rental occurs, but that is the whole purpose of the principal residence requirement. It's something the province introduced into Bill 35, and I think it has greater significance possibly in resort communities where this is, maybe a factor for resort communities to get more into. So the other thing I'll quickly mention about that is I think every year we have to decide again whether electoral areas will opt in or not opt in to Bill 35. So we'll be reporting to committee later, probably early next month on that to see whether anyone wants to opt in for 2025 or beyond. Now, again, the final point on this slide is in red. Fewer than 100 parcels of land in all electoral areas are in zones that permit short-term rental. So the PRR, which applies in 6 of the 9 electoral areas, is a very limited application. Next slide, please, Michelle. This is not really directly related to Bill 35 per se, but the province in enacting Bill 35 indicated that their advice to local government is that if local government is considering permitting short-term rental, if it is already permitted in their zoning or not, that it should only be permitted in a market where the vacancy rate is 3% or greater for rental residential properties. because they consider that to be a reasonable vacancy rate for what they would call a healthy residential market. How this comes into focus for us, because we have so few properties that actually permit short-term rental use, is it's pretty limited. But what I would say, that there's a possibility, of course, that we might eventually change some zoning regulations to permit more than the 100 units that are currently permitted in the entire regional district electoral areas to have short-term rental. And in considering such a future change to zoning, we should pay attention to this criterion. Current vacancy rates for the electoral areas are kind of hard to glean, but the closest we can get to it is Duncan right now, apparently. Well, when I say right now, I think it's as of late fall last year, has a 2.2% residential vacancy rate, but I don't know that that's necessarily reflective of the electoral areas. So in terms of potentially permitting more than the 100 units that are currently allowed to have short-term rentals in the regional district, as I indicated before, there's a couple ways to do it: zoning change or temporary use permits. The first bullet here is about temporary use permits. With Richard Buchan, there's an engagement with the advisory planning commissions that'll be underway shortly. It was actually scheduled to start this week, but the weather kind of interfered with it, where he and I will be attending various APCs to talk about possibly amending the harmonized OCP to permit temporary use permits for a number of different reasons, including short-term rental. And we wanted to get APC feedback and then report back to this committee about our findings and then make a recommendation concerning that. So that would potentially open up an avenue for people who want to do short-term rentals to apply for a temporary permit in order to be able to do it and go through all the processes under Bill 35 to register with the province and so on. The other scenario for potentially permitting additional short-term rental use would be by some sort of changes to zoning, either area-wide, which would be difficult to imagine just by trying to find an entire neighborhood or even a street or something where you had consensus from the people living on that street that yes, we all want to do short-term rentals, and then also looked at the vacancy rate and got information indicating it was above that provincial 3% recommendation and so forth. So I'm thinking that that's more feasible, I should imagine, as a possible zoning change on an individual application basis. The other thing, I can't remember if I maybe blew over it on a previous slide or not, but it's interesting that the province, when they introduced Bill 35, indicated that if a local government at one point in time permits short-term rental, or if short-term rental is lawful non-conforming because maybe the use started before the first zoning bylaw came into place. That's not a factor here, by the way, in this region, but in some it might be. They have changed the usual lawful non-conforming rules so it does not apply to short-term rental in zoning. So if you can imagine a scenario where, let's say, the W8 zone in Cowichan Bay, the stilt homes, let's say, and this is not going to happen probably, but let's just say the board decided that we should no longer permit short-term rentals there, and removed it from that zone. If someone already was operating a short-term rental there, they would have to shut it down. They would not be allowed to continue on a grandfathered basis. So that's a powerful tool that the province introduced in respect of this use only. I don't imagine that will be a factor here, but it could be if in the future we decide to rezone an area or a site to permit the use, and then a future board decides to claw the use back. If that were to happen, the people operating such uses would be required to cease when the zoning changes in the future. So, next slide, please, Michelle. So, oops. There we go, thank you. We have a process underway, and I kind of alluded to it already. February and March, Richard Buchan and myself will be attending every APC at some point, hopefully sooner than later, although 3 of the meetings we were going to have this week got delayed because of weather, to engage with APCs on Bill 35, try to explain this stuff that I've just talked about, which is really confusing, get some feedback on what they think the appropriate response should be. Now, at this point, the staff have prepared some amendment bylaws, just draft amendment bylaws, that clarify the current regulations that we have for those 4 zones in particular by amending the provisions in those zones. When I say those 4 zones, I mean the 4 that permit short-term rental, to explicitly use the term short-term rental so that it aligns more clearly with the provincial legislation, and a number of other amendments. And so we'll be asking the APCs for some advice on that as well as we engage with them on that, and temporary use permits in relation to that. And we already touched on the legislative services and building inspection by law enforcement, working on business licensing. Ian will speak to that momentarily. And yesterday we had that online briefing around this new registry that the province indicated they were going to be operating. Basically what they're saying now, originally we were thinking there would have to be a business license issued by a local government in order for someone who wanted to do either a bed and breakfast or a short-term rental to advertise online. Apparently that's not the case. The province has taken a different tack now, and they've decided to have their own registry requiring people to apply to them online by May 30th or whatever the last day in May is of this year, to be able to advertise on the various online platforms, either bed and breakfast or short-term rental. And the weak link in that is if we have a business licensing bylaw, that sort of has to be indicated to the province, and so there's sort of a confirmation that the use is permitted. If we don't have a business licensing bylaw, the application online done by the person who wants to do short-term rental is on an honor basis, where they basically declare, oh yeah, it's a permitted use, and there's no reference to local government. It's just, if we decide that after the fact we find out that, oh, they got a license, we then have to go through a complaint process, submit a complaint online to the province, who then tries to shut them down after the fact. So that's an additional benefit of having business licensing in respect of this use. So the proposed bylaws, again, I touched on them briefly. There's an OCP amendment that Richard's processing respecting a variety of TUPs, and zoning bylaw 4485 amendment to add some new terminology such as short-term rental, and as well as the various zoning bylaws. So for business licensing bylaw, I'm going to turn this over to Ian. I'm hopeful he can be clearer than I have been, but his is maybe slightly simpler than mine, so I'll come back for questions later. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Tippett. Mr. McDonald.
Actually, I'm going to say thanks to Mr. Tippett, because actually he's stolen a bunch of my thunder already, but I will be able to talk more about some of those. Michelle, if you could advance to the next slide, please. So I've actually presented on the merits of business licensing before, but I'm going to focus just on for bylaw enforcement and how it's a great tool for us. What I did here is this is, in fairness, what this is a snapshot from a program that I have access to, and all the dots represent not necessarily an illegal short-term rental, but just anybody that has, as Micah said, a short-term rental, which can be a legal bed and breakfast, because it's just anybody that's actually currently advertising on the platforms such as Airbnb or Vrbo or some other ones. Next slide, please. And this is just, again, another snapshot. I didn't want to pick on any particular areas, so I'm showing a variety, including Area B and Area A and a part of Area C there as well. Next slide, please. So this is where I was talking about business licensing as a great enforcement tool. One of the things, if we had business licensing, we would actually be able to ticket anybody that was advertising. So one of the things that the province is going to do with that registry is they will, in essence, be stopping and policing it themselves, not allowing anybody to advertise on those sites. However, what that's not going to stop is marketplace, Anybody that has a personal website that they use, so there could still be other methods. What our bylaw would do is be looking for any of that, and then that would allow us to stop the advertising. We feel that in itself will get us probably 80 to 90% of the way there. Some of these next bullets actually were ones that Mike had touched upon. So the advertising hosts have to register with the province prior to listing their STRs. So this is the registry that Mike talked about. And having access to that, to get easy access to this, it's easier if you do actually have a business licensing bylaw already in play. I've been trying to get access to this since last September, and I still don't have access to it. So it's been a very difficult process. Operators are now required by the province to have the license in order to advertise. So that's what I was just saying. And where, as Mike also said, where local governments have business license, but if they don't have business license, they can still advertise. And this is what my next bullet is all about. The province is not enforcing this. And I've been looking to this for quite some time. I asked these questions months ago. I said, well, what's going to happen in this scenario? And they said, good question. And that, so that even yesterday, as Mike and I attended this meeting online, it still looks to me like they really aren't checking. So I actually tried to register myself as if I had a short-term rental. And what would happen if I didn't meet the zoning and I'm in a local government that doesn't require business licensing? There is no check. I could literally just run right through and say, just saying, yes, I meet all the rules, that's it. There's nobody checking back with the local government. There is a process, but it's a difficult, long-winded process and require a lot of staff time that if we did find them, we could then email the province and say, oh, well, we've discovered this, and then they'll look into it, and then some time can go by and blah, 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 and hopefully then it would get pulled off that site. So what this tool would do, having business license, is certainly going to help minimize some of our resources, because trying to prove and do certain things can be very time consuming. If we had the business licensing and you had to prove that through the province's registry, who's also looking at the platforms, they all have to register online, and they never get on those websites, most of our work is done. We'll just be looking for the other ones. And then because finding the ones that aren't advertised is probably going to become more by complaint, because we're just not going to know about them anyway. So let's just say this is why this business licensing tool to us is, we see it as a big victory for us in helping staff do their jobs more efficiently. So I think the next slide is actually questions, and oh, sorry, I thought I'd throw one more in here. This is the Short-Term Rental Accommodation Act and the timeline. And Mike did say by May. So we're sitting in the January, February one right now. So this is what the province is doing. So they are in the process now of making sure that everybody, regardless if you have business licensing or not, and have like the scenario that was described, even a bed and breakfast that's legal with zoning, you still are going to have to register with the province. So that's where they're at right now between this January, February 2025, and by May we expect that will be fully implemented.
Makes sense. Thanks, Mr. McDonald. That's great. I've got a growing speakers list here. I've got Director Morrison, Segal, Acton, and Abbott. So start with Director Morrison.
Thank you, Chair. That was an awful lot of text on your PowerPoint, and I think I actually followed it fairly clearly. I think I'm going to ask that, and I know this is an information item only, but I think I'm going to ask that if staff might be able to produce a flow chart that interprets all of that text, so that, you know, like just the very simple, you know, we allow bed and breakfast as a permitted use, but the differentiation between the province and what we have on the books in our zoning. So I'm going to ask if we can produce a flow chart that, you know, if yes to this, go here, if no, go here, because yeah, I realize there's 100 properties that legitimately can, but we're engrossed and familiar with all of these terms, and I don't know how a member of the public who's got a possibility of a mortgage helper, whether it be a long-term rental or short-term rental, is going to be able to wade their way through all of that explanation you've just given, which I think I followed. So I'm going to ask if that can possibly be done. And the main question that I have here is that I think the provincial intent with their legislation has already been fairly effective. And what I'm sharing is just anecdotal reports from community, in that rents have come down a little bit, the supply has gone up a little bit, and those people that were flagrantly operating short-term rentals contrary to zoning are have either sold their property, or they're getting out, or they've cleaned up their act, and are no longer the subject of complaints from their neighbors. So I good on the province for doing what they've done, but I think that in listening to what you've just presented, it's a very complex, convoluted pathway to someone who wants to operate a bed and breakfast or wants to provide tourist accommodation in their property. It may be well set up to do, but how difficult would it be for them to follow it? And just lastly, Mr. McDonald, I'm going to interpret what you've said as essentially, if we don't do business licensing, then you could drive a Mack truck through the holes of the legislation and the requirements to be honest and reporting that you've got correct zoning and the like. So it almost appears to me from what you've presented is we really don't have a choice. If we want to have some idea what's going on in the short-term rental world within the regional district, we will be obliged to do a business licensing program. And from my perspective, most people that are legitimately wanting to operate a bed and breakfast on their property, or a version of short-term rental, that want to do it right, are going to be willing to register with the business licensing program and with the provincial registry. And I don't think we'll see that much of a pushback for those that want to do it right. We will have people that are in the underground or gray market of the short-term rental business that will push back, but that's what the legislation has been designed to go after. So I'll leave it at that. They're just general comments, but I would like to see something in the form of a color-coded flow chart that more easily gives us a visual representation of what these regulations actually mean.
Thank you, Director Morrison. Mr. Tippett, do you have some highlighters that you can pull out of your desk drawer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through the chair to Director Morrison. Yeah, that's a great idea. Until yesterday, I can't remember whether it was afternoon or morning that session happened. I didn't have a clear enough idea of what the province had up its sleeve to be able to do such a thing. And I was just thinking, if we manage to do one that's clear and coherent, maybe we should, trademark it and sell it to other local governments. But yeah, it's a great idea to try to have a flow chart. It is kind of amenable to that in theory, sort of if yes, this way, and then so on. I never did computer programming. Maybe Ian can help me with that part of it, but it's a good idea, and we'll take a crack at that.
Thank you.
Ian, did you want to try and deal with that other question? Or
just a comment on the business licenses and the opportunity for abuse, I think.
Further to Director Morrison's comment, so as I said before, it's not just about enforcement. The business licensing also had a lot of merits about safety. And that's when I had, I believe it was back in March of 2024 when I presented, and we did get direction to pursue business licensing. And I'll throw a quick one out here for next week, when at Committee of the Whole, there's a report coming forward with business licensing. Anyway, there are a lot of safety aspects. One of the things about building inspection is that we sign a house off, and then it may be permitted to have a bed and breakfast, but we never go back and check 2 years later, 3 years later, a dozen years later, what has changed in there, or do they even meet the requirements of having the safety aspects for a bed and breakfast and or a short-term rental? So these are some of the other aspects. Just selling it straight on an enforcement tool, yes, the fact that we have bonds now, it was in one of my screens, I didn't talk too much about that. One of the nice things about having bonds, and that's the bylaw offense notices, we can mail them to the owners. We don't have to actually physically give them out like MTIs now. So again, having that business licensing bylaw, there's other tools in there that are going to be really handy to us. So here I'm trying to sound like a salesman, but trying to say it's all good.
Mr. Chair, may I add one more thing? And it's not in relation to Director Morrison's question, but you know, those of you who know people who operate, in particular, bed and breakfasts in your community, would be worthwhile letting them know that they are expected and required to register their site as soon as possible. And there's a discounted application fee at the moment if they get in there soon and do it. So the sooner they do it, the better. So if you can spread the word in your communities about that, that will assist them when trying to you know, advertise online. You know, if they don't register, they're going to find that their online advertisements will disappear in late spring or early summer. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Segal.
Thank you. My question's for Mr. Tippett. Just the understanding of short-term rental versus bed and breakfast. So we've now learned from the province that both of those things fall under Bill 35. And then in your presentation, there was one of your slides that was just referring to short-term rentals and like how few we have. But really, should we be looking at how we actually have a lot because of the bed and breakfast allowance? I just got a bit confused there.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to Director Segal, yes, you're right. I realized when I was standing up here looking at that slide that I had written it with the CVRD bias in mind of short-term rental is the 100 units, but the province's version of STR equals bed and breakfast plus STR. I think from a regulatory perspective, we need to keep the two separate because they're very different things. So in our own zoning, I'm not going to propose that we follow the province's lead. I think it only became apparent to me, at least, that the bed and breakfasts were going to be required to be registered about a week and a bit ago when I heard on CBC radio that they're going to create this registry, and that was confirmed yesterday. That B&Bs, the province considers also to be short-term rentals. I don't know what a B&B specifically, presuming it's occupied by the full-time resident, has to do with the availability of rental units as a whole, really, unless, you know, maybe in some communities renting out a bedroom as a form of tenancy is a thing. I don't know that that's a big thing around here, but in other words, I don't see the influence of bed and breakfast in a negative sense on, you know, residential vacancy rates necessarily. But anyway, the province is treating it that way. So yes, I'm sorry for the confusion in that slide. That was my fault.
Follow up? Jacob. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tippett. Director Acton.
Thanks, Chair. Oh, sorry, I don't even know where to start. I have so many questions. So we're almost a year away, and we were supposed to go to the advisory planning commissions for input, and we're gonna do that. And at that time in March, and we were supposed to like
Director Acton, you're
have
freezing on us. Maybe turn your camera off. We lost you for about 8-9 seconds there.
Okay. When we discussed this almost a year ago, with different regulations from the province, we were just being proactive about business license. We weren't saying, we did not actually like fully say, yes, we're into it. It was recommended from staff that we just start the preparations. So now we're going full steam ahead. And at that time, we also asked for an analysis of what the costs are. Here we are in budget time, and we are cutting important things. And I'm not sure this is important. I actually think we're doing a lot blind. And if the province wants us to do it, let them pay for it. So first of all, what we're doing blind is, I agree with Director Morrison. What the province put in created a lot of movement. It created lower rents. More suites came available. I never get an email anymore saying, where I was getting emails from a lot of service workers saying they couldn't find accommodations in our community. Now I haven't had a single one. So it does feel like that has worked, but we're operating on no facts. What has it worked? And we saw, a screenshot of Lake Cowichan, Shawnigan Lake, and Mill Bay. Yeah, those are huge recreational areas, and they're still recreational right now. Vancouver Island is a beautiful place to come. And then we also have private schools. So Mill Bay, a huge chunk of their economy comes from the private school. And I've just been dismissed by sharing this fact, but I know for a fact that the private schools are just sending people to Bear Mountain now. So those are dollars that, when parents come to visit their kids or sporting events, whatever, are not being spent in our communities. I'm seeing a lot of stores close down in our communities. So I think we are operating with no data. And then the fact that we are about to encourage a business license when the province has created their own directory. And in our report, it says that the province will share information with municipalities. So surely if they're going to be willing to share that directory with someone else, they'd be willing to share with a regional district, even if we don't opt in for that, because it's not required for us, because it's only required if we're 10,000 or more. So I would just really caution people, and I think that we need to actually bring this discussion out for more, with more data, so that we can actually make a sound decision. And
Director Acton, just reminders for information, but they're all very good points. I think there's a lot of confusion in the community. Did you have a question? Did you want?
It might be just for information, but it's being presented as very factual, and actually have not even agreed that we want to do business license. And we actually talked about it a year ago with different information without the province directory. So what I would encourage is that we create a resolution that directs staff to come back with more information before we move forward on any more of building a license out.
Yeah, Ms. Boyd?
Thank you, Chair. We do have direction to create a service for business licensing through an alternative approval process that has been approved by the board. Most recently, I have been approached at another opportunity to come before the committee whole to present another way of approving that service establishment bylaw. The service establishment bylaw is an overarching business licensing ability, I guess you could say. We're not going to regulate every business in the Cowichan Valley region. However, this is also the tool to be able to regulate short-term rentals and bed and breakfasts. And that regulatory bylaw would come in behind that overarching business license bylaw. Does that make sense? Thank you.
Did you have a follow-up, Director Acton?
Yes, and the conversation when we were talking about the process and everything, and the bylaws, was that we just were getting ahead of it in case that was the way we wanted to go, and in case the province was requiring it. So we are, again, I'll say, like, we're in budget season. We've cut things that are important, and we've cut things that are, we're trying to be really tight, and now we're creating almost like a lot of work and pretty much a new division, because it's going to be a licensing division that's going to require admin and a whole bunch of positions, when we already just approved a bylaw officer without any of this in mind. So let's have a report back. How's this bylaw officer working? How much is all of this going to cost? So anyway.
Well, there's a couple more people that are on the speakers list. Maybe hold that and we'll come back. We'll go around. Let's start with questions first. I have Director Abbott next, and then Director Nicholson.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to just hitchhike on Directors Morrison and Acton. The word flowchart, he beat us to the punch. and Director Acton is cautioning us on costs. I'm wondering about, Mr. Tippett, when you stood up at the count, you had a confused look on your face as you're trying to wade your way through the ever-changing goalposts. And I go home and I try to explain to a spouse what we are allowed and not allowed to do. And let me throw one more thing into there. Agricultural land. What happens when you're on ALR? Apparently there are new latitudes, or the province ALC takes over STRs. I'm wondering, part of the flow chart, could it dictate, this is the cost if you sign up with the province, which you don't have any choice. This is the cost we're estimating to sign up for a business license with the CBRD. This is the implication. You'd mentioned Area D twice, which I thought, and with no bias, but yeah, I've got a lot of people that do things on stilt homes. We've got people that are renting out their entire house with a suite, and the owner is nowhere to be seen. I am confused. It sounds like there might be confusion around the table. The flow chart would perhaps help us deal with the confusion, buy us a little bit of time, get through the budget season, and not be too hasty to invoke another level of administration at this point. And again, part of my confusion, 100 approved spots there have got to be many, many more operating than 100 in this CVRD. So we know we have an issue, and Ian mentioned that, though they mention in all the printed verbiage VRBO and Airbnb, but your team will be looking at every other avenue that somebody markets. And again, I have to explain that not only to my spouse, but to other people in the community that are running various things. And somebody in my household brought up, what happens to those people that are running, that we've had this where a locum is coming in, he's studying medicine, he has to come in for less than 3 months, he's got to be at the hospital. There are so many people that need accommodation, can't afford a hotel. It's not really a resort application, and it's not 90 days, so I'd love to know, what is an STR day by the day? What's an LTR by the number of days? There are just so many confusing elements to this whole topic. It's not really a question so much as I share your confusion, Mr. Tippett.
Mr. Tippett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, it is confusing. First of all, let me try and back up. I mean, unlike Bill 44, Bill 35 doesn't necessarily require local governments to do anything. The province, if you look at Bill 35 insofar as providing clear direction that local governments shall do X, Y, or Z, there is no such direction. It provides opportunity for local governments, if they believe that this issue is worth attention. And in the past, Director Morrison pointed out in his comments that, and I think this has been borne out in some preliminary statistics we've seen, the paucity of residential tenancies is starting to ease up a little bit, possibly in reaction to just the province creating this program in the first place. But what I want to do is go back to last year when the board directed staff to take the residential tenancy shortage and so forth and the housing crisis seriously. So that's where all of this came from. And yeah, it's taken longer than we had hoped to get to this point, but that's kind of how it is. Anyway, Bill 35, excuse me, all it actually does is it says that the province will regulate access to online advertising platforms, period. At first, we were wondering if they were going to require us to do anything. Is there going to be some kind of zoning check that comes in when someone applies, or are we going to have to do business licensing to make Bill 35 effective? The answer to that question is no, we don't have to. The province will do its own thing if we don't have a business licensing bylaw, and its own thing will consist of what I said earlier, having a registry where people who operate bed and breakfast and short-term rental, as we call it, which is like where the entire house or suite is rented out on a short-term basis, to register with them. And if they don't register with them, they're not going to be permitted to advertise online. That's it. That's the start and finish of the whole thing. So we don't actually necessarily have to do anything. I think from the point of view of clarity, the thing that I'm going to be going to the advisory planning commissions with shortly is a suggested change to wording of zoning bylaws and other bylaws that will clarify, I hope, some of these confusing terms, like the province, for example, calling short-term rental, bed and breakfast and short-term rental. We want to keep them very separate because they're very different things. I think that would be probably just good governance. It doesn't require a new program. It's something that we're going to be doing anyway because there's other requirements to maintain our zoning bylaws. So Ian, I don't know if you wanted to comment sort of on the direction we got in respect of business licensing and so forth, and because that was part of this, and that's not really my thing. So maybe you could possibly address that part of it if you think there's anything you can add.
I probably don't have too much to add in open, and I'm saying that because some is starting to allude to what we would have to do in closed. But what we were given was there was funding last year to have a full-time officer. What this does with the business licensing is makes it more cost effective, especially if we've got that we can use tickets, so we got cost recovery. This is just a tool that to allow one person to be able to utilize their time much better. As I explained earlier, just how that works. I mean, if they're communicating with the province as well as the one that they couldn't even advertise to start with, it's eliminating a whole, as I said, I figured maybe 80 to 90% of these are going to get hit right away. They're not going to get on those platforms. So a lot of, to say it's cost effective is where I'm going with this, is that it's not the fact that we don't see a lot of extra work even to administer business licensing, especially if we're only talking about bed and breakfast and the very few short-term rentals that are even going to be permitted by the zoning. I think if we're really looking at I've heard all the complaints about these different areas and the shortage, and we weren't trying to pick on area D, by the way. But I do understand all that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, a lot of times I stand up here and bylaw gets hammered on saying we're not effective. And then when we try to be effective, we said, oh, well, we're being told to back away. We get mixed messages up here. And it's very frustrating as us in bylaw. So sorry to bring that up, but I mean, it is something that here we've come forward and said we see a great tool. We don't see it being an expensive tool, and we get hit right away with a lot of pushback. So anyway, still pushing for the business licensing.
Yeah, fair enough. You good? I'm just going to jump in. Maybe if you want to stay up. I was just thinking through sort of the process. Like, I think where part of the confusion comes, as I think about it, is we had bylaws on the books that didn't allow short-term rentals, and then we adopted Bill 35, right? Yeah, we said, yeah, let's do it. And Bill 35 could or could not allow some short-term rentals. And I think, I know I wasn't here for the vote, but I assumed that superseded our bylaws. But now our bylaws are still on the books, right? And so it's almost like if there's no short-term rentals allowed, why did we adopt Bill 35?
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'll try and be clear. Like, Bill 35 is a provincial law brought in because the province believed that short-term rentals, which I guess they consider to include bed and breakfast, but probably more likely the entire rental for short-term purposes, which they consider under 90 days, getting back to Director Abbott's point earlier, to be damaging the rental tenure market for people who want to live permanently in rental accommodation. And therefore, they brought Bill 35 into place. And all it really does is deal with the online posting of advertisements in relation to that. When you say we have adopted Bill 35 here, we haven't done anything yet. We're considering possibly making some administrative changes to our zoning to just clarify what we consider to be a short-term rental versus bed and breakfast. But we haven't actually adopted anything at this time. And as I said earlier, we don't really need to. Actually, I mentioned Director Abbott. I'm sorry I didn't answer this part of his question last time I was speaking, but if you'll give me the leeway, I'll try to do that. So the province, again, considers short-term rental to be the occupancy of a dwelling for a period of under 90 days. Our bylaws consider generally, this is not always the case in every zoning bylaw, 30 days to be the threshold. So if you have a month-to-month rental contract with a landlord in whose home or suite you're living, even a 30-day payment for a full month there is considered not to be short-term rental under our bylaws. So that example of a locum coming who has to be here 3 months would not be a problem under our bylaw. It would be a problem possibly under provincial law, which is a whole other thing. So it's, I think the province brought Bill 35 into place for their own reasons. The actions that we've embarked on up to now in respect of business licensing and possibly changing the zoning and so on is a reaction to Bill 35. It's not necessary to actually do anything. You can choose to do nothing. Last year, however, we were directed to do certain things because of the perceived residential tenancy crisis. And so that's where we're at right now. If the opinion collectively around the table is, well, maybe that crisis is eased and perhaps we don't want to go any further on this, then we don't have to necessarily. But that would probably require new board resolutions to sort of undo the work that has been started up to this point. So hopefully that makes sense to you. And I'll let it go now. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Trough, did you want to comment? I saw you.
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so ultimately, local government has the authority to determine where and how you want to regulate short-term rentals and B&Bs. And as noted, the provincial regulation doesn't apply to farm class properties within the ALR. The ALR has their own regulations around agritourism accommodation, and it's permitted if local government permits, which in CBRD we don't currently. So that's where that stands. I just wanted to go back to Director Morrison's question and comments around communications. So the Plan Your Cowichan page regarding short-term rentals has been updated. Hopefully the language is very clear. And I also wanted to add just some comments from the communications and engagement team, or the communications team here at the CBRD, and that they're working on supporting clear, accessible, and engaging public communications about SDRs through frequently asked questions document and graphics to be shared via the corporate CBRD website and Plan Your Cowichan, and that social media channels will also be used to share key points about short-term rentals and including images, video, a website, an ALR map, links, and did you know posts. So there'll be a concerted effort to work with communications staff to make sure that we can make this as easy to understand as possible, recognizing it's really complicated in many ways. But and further to Mr. Tippett's points about the APCs, I mean, we're really looking to get some good feedback from your local APCs around what they want to see in their neighborhoods and their communities, and that is really going to inform recommendations coming back to this committee once that APC engagement has taken place.
Great point. Thanks, Ms. Trough. I've got Director Martman for first time, and then I'll come back to you, Director Acton.
Thank you, Chair, and through to Mr. Tippett and Mr. McDonald, thank you very much. I don't know how you do your job, but thank you for doing it. It's a game changer from my perspective. Someone changes the goalposts and adds B&Bs, which have been, from my understanding, that they're permitted. And now we're looking at how do we want to manage and monitor something that we weren't even thinking about managing and monitoring before Bill 35. And I just find this really complicated. I think the flow chart will be a great idea, but it just takes me back to the basics of I didn't ask for this, and my community didn't ask for this. So how do we unwind ourselves? Because I think, as Director Acton, if the province wants to change the rules and make it that, then they can put the things in place that they need to. I don't think it's upon our board to do that. And I do get it. I do get what Mr. Tippett and Mr. McDonald are saying. It is a tool to have a business license. It is a tool, but I would want to have that tool brought in because we saw the need before this came up, not after the fact. Anyways, I was shaking my head and appreciate the time. And I guess my question would be, how do we get advice? How do we get a chance to say, this isn't working. I don't want to be opting out anymore. I just want to leave this to the province. Maybe that's coming up in a future report.
Thank you. Mr. Tippett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through the chair to Director Martman. Following our engagement with the advisory planning commissions on the topics in relation to short-term rental and so forth, we'll be reporting back to this committee with our findings. We'll hear from each community what their thoughts are on this, and I expect it'll be maybe a slightly more detailed version of what we've heard so far today from the directors here. And that's, I guess, the next natural decision point for further action or inaction, as the case may be, on any of these matters related to Bill 35. But I think it's fair to say, as I said before, that Bill 35 doesn't actually require us to do anything. Up to now, we've used it as an opportunity to try and address the residential tenancy shortage. If that is thought to be maybe under control, then we can certainly change direction at the board's decision.
Thank you, Mr. Tippett. Is that good, Director Martman? Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Director Acton. You're on mute, and perhaps you want to turn your video off, just preempt.
Okay, I'll try with my video on for now.
Okay.
That was one of my questions I had too, was that even though that APC engagement was from, last March, what were we going to engage them on? Like, what are we asking them? Are we asking them, do we want to start regulating all of these businesses, or do we want to start, so maybe just a brief understanding of what we're going to ask the APCs, because we haven't actually gone to the community about any of this yet. And it felt like full steam ahead with this report. And I'm starting to feel a little more at ease that maybe some other people are starting to feel the same way as I am a little bit on this. So yeah, I guess that's my first question. And then I have one more question.
All right. Mr. Tippett, how will we?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Through the chair to Director Acton. So the purpose of the engagement with the advisory planning commissions is to explain to them what I've been saying here, which is there are approximately 100 properties in the CVRD where what we call short-term rental is a permitted use. That is to say, on all other properties, thousands and thousands of them, it's not a permitted use. What do you think about that? Is this a good thing, a bad thing? Should we look at altering the zoning in some cases, or should we look at engaging a temporary use permit tool to perhaps permit additional short-term rentals where they're not currently permitted under zoning? That's the main purpose. The secondary purpose is some other unrelated but sort of housekeeping type amendments to zoning, and also to brief them on some of the stuff we've talked about today, which is, Bill 35, generally the board's previous direction to investigate the possibility of a business licensing bylaw. But that's not the main thing. It's mainly about, whether the lay of the land in terms of short-term rentals is to the liking of APCs or not, and get a bit of feedback on that and bring it back to this committee.
Thank you. Follow-up? Director Acton?
Yeah, and I guess, some of that information is going to be useful to have. So can we wait until we get that information before we continue moving forward with all of the both steps of producing a license, short-term rental license, and then the opting in questions and filling some of the gaps that we don't know yet, like how much things will cost? So,
Yeah, I think he's ready to answer, Mr. Tippett.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In terms of opting in, there is a deadline that I can't remember exactly what it is. I think it's March 31st or something like that. So the way it's panning out right now, it looks like some of our APC meetings are not going to happen until towards the end of March, just because of the weather delays this week. But I don't know. I normally would be bringing some sort of report in respect of opting into the principal residence requirement of the short-term rental Bill 35 provisions before that deadline, so that if we do decide to opt in, that the ones who want to opt in can make that resolution and get it off to the province in time. I would propose still to do that, and if the decision is no one wants to opt in, that's cool. We'll tell the province about it and carry on, but I'd rather not just sit on it unless other directors tell me right now to sit on it, all of them. Thanks.
Yeah, okay, sorry, maybe that wasn't the right term, but just to be, moving forward with business licensing and instead of just allowing the province to let them do their thing. And so I guess.
Director Acton, I'm just going to pause you for a second. Sorry. Mr. Tippett, you thought you were going to come back with a report before we have to opt in, right? And is that a natural point? Like, so are you looking for direction from us today before you get out there and do work, or no? Okay, that's what I thought you just asked. Yeah.
No, the Bill 35, one of the things it does require us to do is every year consider whether any of the electoral areas wish to opt into the principal residence requirement. So I was going to, as a matter of course, bring that back to you in early March for consideration.
Okay. Director Acton, sorry, I cut you off there. I wasn't sure where that comment was. Do you want to finish your thought?
I just thought there was maybe some consensus building that maybe we should be kind of having more information before we continue to trudge forward on all items discussed today.
Yeah. It's going to go to the APC, and I think we're going to have more time for discussion. There's going to be a couple more pressure points where we have to make decisions.
Well, it sounds like there's lots of items being worked behind the scenes with staff, so I don't know, is
staff's looking at me.
Miles Wilson there? Can she help us out with that, or?
Yeah.
Hey, Director Morrison?
I don't know if this works.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So staff are working on bringing a report forwards, I believe, next week regarding the business licensing approach. And we're working on direction from this committee and the board to do so. So we're marching forwards with the direction we have. If there's a course correction, there will be a report next week. I suppose there could be a direction to kind of change approach at that point. But behind the scenes work is fully with direction. And so understanding there's lots of things that are changing in this landscape, and there's questions. So I would say next week would be a good opportunity to have that discussion with the full report in front of you, which you'll receive this Friday when you get the agenda package.
That's at the board meeting or the committee? Committee? Okay. So show up for committee, Director Acton.
I won't be there. Thanks, though. I'm honestly.
All right. I think, Director Morrison, close us out.
Just very quickly, I know that my APC was scheduled to meet, I think, yesterday and for discussion of this topic, and are really quite engaged and are working to reschedule as soon as possible so that their input can be considered by this committee sooner than later.
Okay. Thank you, Director Morrison. I'm going to go to Director Nicholson to close us out.
Thank you, Chair. I am wondering, I've got two questions. So I am glad we're getting the licensing conversation next week. I am wondering if we'll have an update on the enforcement that we've funded on this topic at the same time, because I think that's connected.
Mr. McDonald's coming to the podium.
Through the chair to Director Nicholson. That was a little bit of the component that I think would be best for closed.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up?
And we'll have.
You cut out there a little bit, Director Nicholson.
I'm just wondering if we'll have it to inform our licensing discussion.
I can bring forward that to Committee of the Whole next week. Closed.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. And then I really appreciate the work that staff are doing on the communication of this really complicated, weird thing that we're dealing with. And I'm wondering if we can also communicate directly with those people who do have legitimate short-term rentals in our zoning to let them know.
Mr. Tippett?
Mr. Chair, yes, Director Nicholson, we have the ability to do that. We don't have direction to do that, however. I don't know whether any of those 100 properties on which short-term rentals, as we define them, are permitted are actually doing that use right now. One of the examples is Sandy Beach Resort in Electoral Area A, which permits the use, but I gather that their ownership group doesn't permit the use. So it's kind of, there's I can't remember how many units they have there now, 18 or something, that aren't being used in that way. I mean, I don't, it would be complicated because, I did mention earlier this idea of bed and breakfast being required by the province to register in order to advertise online. To me, that's a more pressing matter because there's lots of bed and breakfasts in the Cowichan Valley that really should know about that and also know that there's a discount right now if they get that registration done sooner than later. To me, that's a bit more urgent, actually.
Thank you, Mr. Tippett.
Just
Final follow-up.
ask a question. Could we not put a big ad in the newspaper or something?
Maybe. Let's follow up after. We'll follow up with staff outside, I think. It's been a well-discussed item. Obviously lots of interest, lots of people in the community have questions, so thank you to the fellow directors. Let's move on to R5.
R5, report from the Inspections and Enforcement Division regarding the 2024 year-end bylaw enforcement report for information.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here to present the Bylaw Enforcement 2024 year-end report, and I'll provide a brief summary. In 2024, there were 247 calls for service that were investigated, compared to 298 in 2023, which is about a 20% decrease in calls for service. Some significant decrease in complaints were associated with backyard burning, building without a permit, and waste management. I'll talk about some of the highlights of 2024 for bylaw enforcement. As you guys have probably heard before, enforcement staff met with Malahat Nation staff to discuss land guardianship and file processes as far as enforcement and management goes. So that was really rewarding for both CBRD staff and Malahat Nations. Enforcement staff also met with Cowichan tribes to generally discuss some common problems within the Cowichan Bay area, and it was a very constructive conversation with some positive results for Cowichan tribes. Much to our delight, the Shawnigan Focus community newspaper that came out in January was referencing December 2024 and attributing the amended soil deposit bylaw for clear waters, the headwaters of the Shawnigan Creek, South Shawnigan Creek, noticed by the Shawnigan Basin Society executives, saying that essentially the amended bylaw has made quite a difference in their observations in controlling sediment entering the creek. One last thing on the lighter side is there's a local government compliance and enforcement association in BC that our officers are members of. They put out a calling for the top 10 funniest or most humorous calls for 2024. And although CBRD did not have any submissions, I'll give you 3 of them. One is categorized as roses are red, tulips are yellow. Person was upset because the neighbor planted yellow tulips clashing with the color of their fence. Another one was personal drama. The neighbor's cat sits on the fence and stares at them. And then the other one was categorized as a wildfire woe. A member of the public was concerned because the neighbor's pond continues to attract snakes and other wildlife. So I guess we'll consider ourselves very fortunate in the CBRD that we deal with routine typical complaints. And I'm here for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. That's great. Mr. Abbott, or Director Abbott.
Thank you, Chair. Good report, Mr. Harris. I noticed under the animal control, 72 dog licenses sold in the 2024. 2 of those belong to my dogs. Do you mean there are only 70 other dogs in the entire, or what can we do to encourage more people to buy a dog license?
So I'll just provide some clarification through the chair to Director Abbott. Those 72 dog licenses are what our contractor is reporting to us as a result generally of their investigations or impounded dogs without licenses. So they, as a result of getting compliance through their investigations or an impounded dog that comes in without a license, have sold an additional 72 licenses. I'm trying to recall the amount of licenses off the top of my head. Yeah, that's okay. It's a couple 3,000 dog licenses somewhere in there at the moment. 4,000, I'm not exactly sure, but that explains that. Yeah.
Follow up? Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Harris. Director Nicholson.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for about the table about dogs impounded. And I can't figure out why there's a total by area for Area E of 26, but there's, when I add up the number that are actually impounded, it's 13. So I don't understand the table.
Okay, I'll just take a quick look at that. So through the chair to Director Nicholson, in respect to Area E, the number of dogs impounded is reported to be 13. Claimed 3, adopted 2, euthanized 6, transferred for adoption. I'm just doing the quick math, 21, 23. Yeah, I'm gonna have to talk to our, I'll have to get clarification through the contractor, and I'll follow up with you, Director Nicholson, regarding that.
Okay, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I was also wondering what confinement means.
Okay, so actually now that I'm just back to your first question, what the report is stating is 13 dogs impounded in Area E, 3 claimed, 2, okay, so forgive me, I'll get back to you on that. And sorry, what was your second question?
And what does confinement mean?
Confined is typically when there's a call to our animal control contractor to come pick up a dog. Somebody has found a dog at large, or a stray dog, or just a dog. So somebody has a dog confined, and then they relay that to our contractor. Hey, I found a dog in the neighborhood. Please come get it.
Okay, so, right, so essentially they were wandering too.
Yeah, they're at large.
And then, can I ask one more question?
Sure, absolutely.
Go ahead, Director Nicholson.
Oh, sorry.
We euthanized 11 animals, and so I'm wondering if they're, it's a shame that they do not get adopted, and I understand that sometimes animals aren't really very adoptable, but I'm wondering how long do they keep them, and what efforts do they make to have them adopted?
Yeah, through the chair to Director Nicholson, I believe generally there's a minimum 5-day holding period. They will hold them indefinitely if they really feel that there's just a problem connecting with the people. I did question the euthanizations, and what Coastal is reporting is they do work with a dog rescue society or group that will come in. If a dog comes in as a stray and it goes unclaimed, the rescue group will assess the dog to see if it can be adopted, if it doesn't have any significant aggression issues. And at times there are underlying health issues with dogs too. So that's what was conveyed to me from Coastal Animal Control.
Thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions? Very good. That was for information. Moving on to our final item. 2 more?
Yeah. R6, report from the Inspections and Enforcement Division regarding the 2024 year-end building inspection report.
That's right. Who wants a brieski?
Chair McClinton, thank you very much. You all have the report. Numbers are not great. I am here for questions.
Looking around. Director Acton.
Well, just if Sonny could kind of like give us why he thinks so, like what are people talking about and saying? Is it like uncertainty in the economy, or like what do you think's going on by being the boots on the ground?
Through the chair to you, Director Acton. There was a developer that stood up here earlier this afternoon, and if you listen carefully, they spoke about the cost of construction, the cost of land, cost of obtaining approvals, the timeline it takes to obtain approvals, holding on to land that offers no use or income is not free. I think there was an article in the newspaper this week or last about another major housing development in Duncan that was canceled due to the cost of construction. So as of right now, it's not really a viable business for major developers. The risk is not worth the reward right now.
Thank you. I've got Director Morrison. Oh, first I should ask if you had a follow-up, Director Acton. Sorry. No? Okay. Director Morrison, then Director Martman.
Yeah, thank you. These are pretty discouraging numbers considering we're in a housing crisis and not a lot of new housing starts. I guess I'd like to ask if you've got a number, the number I've heard for general costs for construction for new house construction is about $300 a square foot. And do you have any anecdotal knowledge or information? I posed the question because 1,000 square foot home is going to be $300,000 to construct, plus the land, plus all the permitting and the likes. Your explanation as to not a lot of profit in it for developers makes a lot of sense. So does that $300 a square foot ring true from what you understand?
Through the chair to you, Director Morrison, I'd say $300 a square foot's kind of light. I'd be thinking a little bit more about $400, $450. And what we've got to be mindful about when we're pricing developments and housing and things like that is every house contains a kitchen and a bathroom and a mechanical room. And these are the most expensive parts of the house. Bedrooms are cheap. Additional square footage and living room, those things are cheap. So I think I spoke to you about modular housing about a year or so ago and attempted to make the point that the smaller the house, the price per square foot actually increases. So with that being said, I'd say 300 is pretty light. That's carpet and maybe no baseboard and, cheap.
Follow-up?
Thank you.
Director Martman.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I always interested in how you will align this information that you provided with the housing needs report. Like how far off are we off target, and what's the consequence?
Through the chair to you, Director Martman, with all honesty, I'm not probably the best person to speak to the housing needs report, but I mean, what I can say is I think Director Morrison hit the nail on the head earlier this afternoon, and it's quite simple that, if we want to say that we're in a housing crisis and we're presented with an application for housing, what are we going to do with it?
Follow-up?
think he left he left it on my lap. Thanks, Chair.
Very good. Looking around, I don't see any other hands. That item was for information. Thank you very much, Mr. Pruski.
Thank you, Chair.
There's no unfinished business. However, there is some new business. Ms. Boyd?
Yes, this is the new business item added earlier in the amended agenda. Cowichan Bay Waterworks District, a letter received January 24th, 2025.
Received. Thank you. Moving on to question period. Do we have people in the gallery that have a question? Nobody in the gallery? Anybody online? What's that? Motion to adjourn? Moved? Seconded? All in favor? Anybody opposed?